uns hier in Europa bedeutet das, dass wir den europäischen Pfeiler der NATO stärken müssen. Auch und ganz besonders, wenn es darum geht, über ein ausreichendes Abschreckungspotenzial zu verfügen. Denn unsere europäische Fähigkeit zur Abschreckung und Verteidigung muss immer glaubwürdig sein. Und wir müssen die vorhandenen Kapazitäten besser nutzen und die Zusammenarbeit zwischen unseren Ländern vertiefen. Ganz praktisch tun wir das mit Großbritannien bei einer ganzen Reihe von Projekten, bei einem neuen Artilleriesystem und beim Radpanzer Warsaw. Wir arbeiten zusammen beim Eurofighter und wir wollen auch dieses Flugzeug weiterentwickeln und wollen auch zusammenarbeiten bei der Sky Shield-Initiative. Ich sehe deshalb auch sehr positiv der Entwicklung entgegen, dass Großbritannien dem deutsch-französisch-spanischen Exportkontrollabkommen beitritt und damit auch unsere Kooperation weiter vertieft werden kann. Unsere beiden Länder, Deutschland und Großbritannien, leisten wichtige Beiträge zu Europas verteidigungsindustrieller Basis. Und das wollen wir auch weiter stärken und weiter ausbauen. Wir werden deshalb auch eine Taskforce einsetzen, um die strukturierten und verbesserten Rahmen für bilaterale Sicherheits- und Verteidigungskooperation zu schaffen. Wir benötigen auch einen Austausch über viele Fragen der bilateralen Zusammenarbeit, die wir vertiefen werden. Da geht es zum Beispiel um Kooperation im Bereich der Energie, ganz besonders wenn es um erneuerbare Energien geht und Offshore-Wind in der Nordsee. Wir wollen auch eine Machbarkeitsstudie auf den Weg bringen, um den Handel mit Wasserstoff zwischen Deutschland und Großbritannien voranzubringen. Wir blicken auf eine sehr gute Kooperation unserer Sicherheitsbehörden, zum Beispiel gegen Schleuser und organisierte Kriminalität. Und deshalb werden wir auch den Dialog und die Zusammenarbeit in Migrationsfragen fortsetzen, unter Wahrung von Grundrechten und internationalem Recht. Für uns in Deutschland gehört dazu, dass wir auch legale Wege der Zuwanderung in unsere Gesellschaft mit im Blick haben, die wir brauchen, damit Wirtschaftswachstum und ökonomischer Wohlstand auch in Zukunft gewährleistet sind. Im Übrigen geht es uns darum, dass wir die Kontakte zwischen Deutschen und Briten stärken wollen. Das ist mir jedenfalls sehr wichtig, dass wir auch da unsere Zusammenarbeit ausbauen und es möglich machen, dass da keine Hürden dem engen Austausch der Briten und Deutschen entgegenstehen. Wir begrüßen viele Zusammenarbeiten, die wir im Bereich der Innovation haben und der Forschung. Auch das gehört zu der Partnerschaft unserer Länder. Man sieht, wir haben viele Themen, die wir miteinander laufend besprechen. Und ich bin deshalb umso mehr froh, dass wir das jetzt auch hier vor Ort in Berlin im direkten Kontakt tun. Ich will gerne ergänzen, das fällt umso leichter, als wir beide schon eine sehr lange Partnerschaft miteinander haben. Bevor wir unsere heutigen Ämter hatten, haben wir auch schon zusammengearbeitet. Und ich erinnere mich jedenfalls gerne daran. Und ich weiß, dass das für Rishi Sunak genauso gilt. In dem Sinne, schönen Dank fürs Kommen.
Well, Olaf, mein Freund, it's a real pleasure to be with you again. And as Olaf was saying, we go way back. And I remember when we were both finance ministers in the darkest days of the pandemic, I was on the phone a lot with you, and I hugely valued your advice as I designed our furlough scheme, which took in some part inspiration from your Kurzarbeit policy that you had instituted previously. And I also remember we bonded over the UK's most famous export to your adopted hometown of Hamburg, which was, of course, the Beatles. And when His Majesty the King was here last year on his first state visit as monarch, he spoke in the Bundestag of renewing the special bond of friendship between our countries. And our partnership is, I believe, a perfect symbol of that. And at this dangerous moment, the bond between our two nations is stronger than ever. We meet as a war rages on our continent and new threats are rising around the world. And Olaf, I want to congratulate you on your leadership in recognizing the Zeitenwende and you taking the historic decision to increase Germany's defense spending. And we stand here today together as the leading defense spenders in Europe, unshakable NATO allies, and the two largest military supporters of Ukraine in Europe. And together we will continue to provide unwavering support for our Ukrainian friends, as you said, for as long as it takes. And we look forward to the Ukrainian Recovery Conference being hosted here in Berlin in June. And I know we'll continue to work closely together on other global challenges, including putting the Middle East on a better path. And together we have acted to meet this moment. We've taken greater responsibility for our collective security, and today we're going even further, opening a new chapter in the security relationship between our two nations, as you heard from Chancellor Scholz. We've committed to delivering a new framework for our cooperation on defence, and we're delivering an immediate expansion of our industrial cooperation, announcing a joint endeavour to procure the Boxer artillery system, providing our soldiers with a new cutting-edge capability and supporting hundreds of German and British jobs. Because, let's be clear, this is a partnership that connects with all aspects of our economy and our society. And you and I discussed our cooperation in many other areas today, from technology and AI to irregular migration to trade and investment. And I'm delighted to say that we've also secured around £8 billion of new investment in Britain, including into our energy sector. So I very much look forward to deepening our discussions in the coming months and weeks through the G7 and the NATO summits, the European political community, and maybe when our two football teams meet at Euro 2024. Because for all our shared values and our shared determination to meet the challenges of this new era, the thing that really unites us, as you said, is our people, Olaf. The love that Liverpool has for Jurgen Klopp, or that Munich has for Harry Kane. It's a reminder of the special bond of friendship that His Majesty has described. So as close allies, partners and friends,
States. And Prime Minister, can I ask you, you were yesterday talking about a projected increase in defence spending, but some people feel only a few weeks after the budget coming up with this, a budget where you prioritise tax cuts, that you're not entirely squaring with people. There's a mismatch between the rhetoric you use about a generational moment, a milestone when Europe needs to spend more on defence, and then you say that you can plug the hole by cutting a few civil servants and rejigging a research and development budget. Don't you need to square with people and say, actually, it's going to be a lot more pain than that, whether it's tax rises or very deep spending cuts?
Shall I take that first, Olaf? So Gary, I don't think that's a fair characterisation. The plan that I announced yesterday is fully funded. And it's funded rightly with a reduction in civil service headcount back to 2019 levels. Since then, we've seen a very significant rise that isn't sustainable or needed. The Chancellor has conducted a detailed exercise. He announced this at the end of last year. That exercise is completed, and that's what gives us the confidence that we can release the savings needed to fund our defence plan, combined with an uplift in R&D spending, which we had already budgeted for, is already included in our plans. But you're right, we are making a choice to prioritise defence with both of those decisions, and I believe that's the right thing to do, because whether we like it or not, the world is, I think, more dangerous than it's been at any moment since the Cold War. And it falls on leaders, whether that's Olaf, whether that's me, to do what's necessary to keep our countries and our continent safe and to stand up for our values. That's what Britain has always done, and that's what we are doing today. That's why I announced what I did yesterday. It is the biggest strengthening of our national defence in a generation. It is fully funded, and it is based on the fact that we have a strong economy and an economic plan that is working. And you can see that when I came into this office and inflation was at 11%, it's now 3% and falling, energy bills coming down, interest rates to follow, growth returning, and it's because our economic plan is working that I'm able to make announcements, and they are entirely consistent with our ability to keep cutting people's taxes. You know, just in the past few weeks, the second of our tax cuts kicked in. That's a £900 tax cut, for someone on average earnings, together with the state pension going up £900 and our tax cuts to support business investment. But you do need to have a clear and credible economic plan in order to make these announcements. We do. That plan is working, and that's why I was able to announce what I did. I mean, Olaf will answer your question on the US. I think the only thing I'd point out before he does is, I think Olaf would agree with me, US presidents, as you've heard from the Secretary General yesterday, have always called for more European defence spending. That's not new. And I think that is entirely reasonable. Olaf addressed it in his remarks. We can't expect Americans to pay any price, to take any burden, if we in Europe are not ourselves prepared to make those sacrifices and make those investments. And that's exactly what we are doing. I think Olaf, I talked about the Zeitenwende and the leadership he's shown. You've seen my announcement yesterday. I said we've historically been one of the people that's always met our 2% commitment. But it's important that we in Europe demonstrate that we are doing that in order, I think, to keep the US committed to NATO, and the weekend news was very welcome. Olaf.
Ja, schönen Dank für Ihre Frage. Ich weiß, warum Sie gefragt haben, denn die Beziehung zwischen den USA und Deutschland, die Beziehung zwischen den USA und den europäischen NATO-Staaten und auch Europa insgesamt sind exzellent. Das hat was zu tun mit der Leadership von Präsident Biden, die wirklich außerordentlich ist und der sich sehr intensiv und aktiv bemüht um eine gute Entwicklung der internationalen Beziehungen. Und dazu gehört natürlich unsere enge Zusammenarbeit in der NATO dazu. Gleichwohl, wir haben eine NATO-Allianz, die zwischen Staaten abgeschlossen ist, zwischen Nationen. Wir wollen das nordatlantische Bündnis gemeinsam voranbringen, damit wir das, was uns auch als gemeinsame Werte verbindet, Demokratie, Rechtsstaatlichkeit, Marktwirtschaft, verteidigen können. Und so ist es. Deshalb bin ich ganz zuversichtlich, dass sich daran über die vielen Jahre, die wir jetzt vor uns haben, die nächsten Jahrzehnte nichts ändern wird. Und da wird es ja immer mal wieder neue Präsidenten geben, in 8 Jahren zum Beispiel oder in 12. Also da, glaube ich, müssen wir darauf vertrauen, dass das eine langfristige Partnerschaft ist. Ich will ergänzen, dass es in der Tat so ist, dass Europa seine Anstrengungen zur Verteidigung massiv ausgeweitet hat. Das gilt für Deutschland mit unserem Sondervermögen, das gilt mit unserem Commitment, dauerhaft wenigstens 2% unserer Wirtschaftsleistung für Verteidigung auszugeben. Und das ist dann schon sehr viel. Wenn man das berechnet, ist das eine sehr starke Verteidigungsarmee, die dabei entsteht und die auch gebraucht wird, damit wir unser NATO-Territorium gemeinsam verteidigen können. Denn auf unsere Kraft sind ja auch diejenigen angewiesen, die von uns erwarten, dass wir im Falle eines Angriffs ihr Territorium verteidigen. Das können wir und das werden wir können.
Herr Bundeskanzler, ist für Sie nach dem US-Hilfspaket der Zeitpunkt gekommen, wo Sie einer Lieferung von Taurus-Marschflugkörpern an die Ukraine jetzt zustimmen, weil die Amerikaner ja auch substanziell neue Waffensysteme in dem Paket haben? And Prime Minister, do you actually understand the argument of Chancellor Scholz so far for not delivering Taurus cruise missiles? And just one question to add to the former one. Would you both agree that the 2.5% should be the new NATO goal for defense spending? Thanks.
Schönen Dank für diese Frage zu der Unterstützung für die Ukraine. Das gibt mir die Gelegenheit, noch mal darauf hinzuweisen, dass Deutschland der größte Unterstützer der Ukraine ist in finanzieller Hinsicht, aber eben auch, wenn es um Waffenlieferung geht. Wir haben seit dem Ausbruch des Krieges Waffen geliefert oder zugesagt im Wert von etwa 28 Milliarden Euro. Das ist mit weitem Abstand das meiste, was in Europa gegenwärtig aufgebracht wird. Sie wissen, dass auch in diesem Jahr das Budget, das wir in unserem Verteidigungshaushalt und unserem Haushalt vorgesehen haben, um die militärische Unterstützung der Ukraine zu organisieren, oberhalb von 7 Milliarden Euro liegt. Das ist ein erheblicher Betrag. Und wir haben auch zusammen mit Großbritannien, manchmal auch alleine, sehr weitreichende und effektive Mittel geliefert, damit die Ukraine sich verteidigen kann. Ich erinnere an die Mehrfachraketenwerfer, die wir zusammen mit den USA und Großbritannien auf den Weg gebracht haben und die unverändert eine wichtige Rolle spielen bei der Verteidigung der Ukraine und wo wir auch gerne und in der Strecke mehr machen wollen. Ich erinnere daran, dass wir einen großen Teil der Luftverteidigung der Ukraine möglich machen. Dazu zählen unsere Flakpanzer Gepard. Dazu zählt das, was wir möglich gemacht haben mit dem Iris-T-System, das eine erstklassige Unterstützung der Ukraine bei der Luftverteidigung gewährleistet. Und daran zu zählen die bisher 2 und demnächst 3 Patriot-Batterien mit all den Raketen, die dazugehören. In dieser Größenordnung hat kein einzelner Staat solche Unterstützungsleistungen mit Luftverteidigung, mit Patriot möglich gemacht. Und wir sehen da schon unsere Rolle, genau auf diesem Pfad weiterzugehen. Was die von Ihnen angesprochene, das Waffensystem betrifft, wird sich meine Entscheidung nicht ändern.
So, look, when it comes to supporting Ukraine, I'm obviously very proud of everything that the UK has done, not just the quantum where we stand alongside Germany as the 2 biggest supporters of Ukraine, but also, when it's come to capabilities over time, new things like training Ukrainian soldiers, providing main tanks, long-range weapons, etc. We've always tried to be on the forefront of getting them help that they need. But what I'd say is, and echo what Olaf said, is I think you can't get away from the fact that Germany right now, alongside the UK, is the single big need. But what I'd say is, and echo what Olaf said, is I think you can't get away from the fact that Germany right now, alongside the UK, is the single biggest supporter of Ukraine. And particularly, and you mentioned one capability, every country has got different things that it can bring to the table. You heard Olaf talk about Patriots. One of the key needs of Ukraine is air defence. And all the conversations that Olaf and I have had together with President Biden, we've talked about the importance of getting air defence to Ukraine. And I think on that, Olaf and Germany deserve particular praise for the support that they're providing, which I just spoke to President Zelensky yesterday. We were again talking about the importance of air defence, and he was talking about the role that Olaf and Germany have played in that. So I've got nothing but praise for Olaf's leadership on this. And we have, thankfully, a wide and broad coalition of countries who are united in wanting to support Ukraine. Everyone can bring something slightly different and complementary to the table, but the key thing is we're united on wanting to support Ukraine for as long as it takes, so that Putin is seeing that his aggression will end in failure, and we're defending the values that are incredibly important to us. I think the other thing is, to your question on defence spending more generally, I was with the NATO Secretary General yesterday, and it's clear that the world that we're living in is increasingly dangerous. And I described an axis of authoritarian states which increasingly are working together to cause instability around the world in a way that damages our security at home, whether that's here, whether that's in the UK, on our continent. And I think it's right that in light of that, we recognise that we need to do more. Now, obviously, Olaf and Germany have done that with the Zeitenwende. We've historically spent the 2% of defence, 2% of GDP on defence, the old NATO standard. And I do believe we're in a world where defence spending is rising. You are seeing that across the continent, Germany, UK, Norway, Baltic states. That is happening. And I do believe that we'll look back at this moment in time and recognise that this was an inflection point where the old paradigm is no longer the case, and we have to adjust for the new paradigm, because, as Olaf said, we will do what's necessary to keep our country safe, our continent safe, and defend our values.
Thank you both. Natasha Clark from LBC. Prime Minister, you've said that defence will be a priority today. You've told your MPs that this announcement means deprioritising other things, including in the Tory manifesto. What is going to have to go? Does this mean that tax cuts, more tax cuts, are now off the table to pay for this promise? And just to follow up on Gary's question, would you like to rule out further cuts to public services or cuts to our troop numbers? And to Mr. Scholz, you've been discussing migration today with Mr. Sunak. We know that Germany has its own problems with migration. Are you also looking at a Rwanda-style deal to send a third country to send migrants to? Thank you.
So, Natasha, I think probably I'll echo a little bit what I said to Gary already. Look, we're able to make the announcements we made yesterday because we've got an economic plan, and that plan is working. Growth returning, inflation coming down, energy bills coming down, wages rising, and we've been able to do all these things. We have record investment in our public services, including the NHS. That's not going to change. It's going to continue to increase. We have record investment in our schools. That's not going to change. It's going to continue to increase. And alongside that, we are able to cut people's taxes. As I said, £900 tax cut for an average person in work, the state pension going up by £900. But we have made a choice, and I'm not shying away from that choice. All governing is about prioritising. I've decided to prioritise defence because I think that's the right thing to do for our country. I'm not going to get into writing the next manifesto here and now, but what I am confident about is that if you have a strong plan for the economy, as we have, and that plan is working, and we stick to that plan, we will be able to continue increasing defence spending. It's a completely funded plan. We've got a very clear idea of how to reduce civil service headcount, which has grown considerably over the past few years. We can bring that back and use that to fund what I announced yesterday, and alongside that continue to invest in public services and cut people's taxes. But I can only say those things because we've got a plan, and that plan is working, and I'm prepared to make choices. And I'm being honest and upfront about that with everyone. Defence is a priority for me, it's a priority for the government, and it's the right priority for the country. And if someone is telling you that's the wrong priority, they should explain why they think that's the case, when it's very clear that the international environment is changing. And on irregular migration, Olaf and I had a good chat about it earlier, and I'm sure what he'll tell you is that irregular migration is a shared challenge across the European continent, and all leaders are discussing how we can cooperate and work together to combat it. We obviously saw yesterday tragic loss of life in the Channel. It just reminds us the importance of tackling these criminal gangs, something that Olaf and I have discussed, where we do have good law enforcement cooperation, as well as working with countries around the world to stem the flow. And everyone's going to do that in a slightly different way. And actually, you've seen, I think, the Dutch and Italian Prime Ministers recently with the EU President thinking about how they can do that in North Africa to stem that flow and forming partnerships with those countries. But I think, Olaf, that's very much the conversations that you and I have been having.
Schönen Dank für die Frage nochmal.
Thank you very much for that question. Yes, we have major challenges that we need to confront. One of them is dealing with the many questions around migration. Germany is a country that sees economic growth and will see economic growth in future years as well. So we depend on immigration of many men and women who are talented and skilled and who are needed here. We have reformed our immigration law for workers. We have facilitated rules, and I think we have the most modern ones globally to bring the talent that's needed to Germany. Everyone who wants to be part of German economic development. At the same time, we see the challenge of illegal migration. And last year, we have taken some far-reaching decision on how we can manage irregular migration in Germany in a better way. Many pieces of legislation have been changed. There are some individual regulations that have been changed, which is necessary for us to succeed. It's about digitalization of public authorities, how we can make sure that courts decide quickly. Some are fast, 3.5 months, others take 20 months to take a decision for the same cases. So we made progress and we did this, we delivered. So last year for me was the country where all the decisions have been prepared, and from a German perspective, these are necessary for managing illegal migration. Summing up, I would say that being open for the immigration of skilled labor and the management of illegal migration, there have been the most far-reaching changes of the last 20 or 30 years only last year, and they will have their effects. This is, of course, also complemented, which is important for us, by a change and improved cooperation within the European Union. We have just adopted or prepared the necessary legislation in Europe with the joint common European asylum system. This is a major progress many couldn't have reckoned with over years, and now we're also discussing bilateral questions. Fighting trafficking is important to all of us, also for our bilateral relations, and we are effective.
Thank you, Prime Minister, Chancellor. I have a question to both of you. There have been arrests of suspected Chinese spies, both in the UK and in Germany recently. How worrying is that from your point of view? What does it mean for the relations to China, and what consequences should be drawn from those cases? Und Herr Bundeskanzler, eine Nachfrage.
And Mr. Chancellor, one more question about the US arms package for Ukraine and Taurus, in your decisions about delivering arms systems of a new quality, you have always been, let's say, guided by the Americans' decisions. This was the race for long-range artillery systems, for tanks. Why is it not the case when it comes to cruise missiles? Thank you for these questions, and I will be happy to answer them. The last question. We have delivered long-range artillery systems, multiple launch rocket systems. As I said, that we've made available. Germany, the UK, the US have rather early been the first ones to deliver such systems for Ukraine to defend itself, and we are, of course, delivering more over time. This is the task that we have. And these arms are also like the ones that are now in the package. My decision is clear about this one arms system, but my decision is also clear. We will continue to be the largest supporter of Ukraine in Europe, and we will continue to work with the UK and be the two who do most. And the 3 Patriot systems, I have mentioned them before. This is crucial. Air defense is crucial, and that's of utmost importance right now. And let me also express my hope that other countries that also have Patriot systems may also look at their stocks and see whether, despite their own security needs, they could spare such a system, because only few can truly make a difference and massively enhance the effectiveness of Ukraine's air defense. Regarding the first question about China, yes, it is very important that we have good intelligence services, good public prosecutors, good police work, and that everybody works closely together, also beyond borders. And we cannot tolerate espionage carried out against our country, regardless from where it comes. So it needs to be detected, and those who are responsible for it needs to be taken to court. You see from the most recent detentions in our country and elsewhere that we are quite successful. But this should not be a reason to be complacent. We need to do everything we can to detect all of them who work against us, against our security, carrying out espionage activities, and that's the immediate response that's necessary. Let me add one more sentence. The suspicion against team members and candidates of the AfD party is very worrying. We are a state of the rule of law, so I won't interfere in the work of the judiciary or the public prosecution, and I won't. But what we have learned here is a huge reason of concern.
Hopefully you'll appreciate there's very little that I can say, because in the UK these proceedings are subject to a live criminal investigation, so I hope you'll understand that. But what I can say more generally and more broadly, defending our democracy, our democratic processes and institutions is an absolute priority, and we won't tolerate any activity that undermines that. Last year we passed a new law, the National Security Act, that gives our law enforcement agencies, security services, a new set of tools and powers so they can respond to threats from hostile foreign actors, espionage, and things like that. And we fully intend to back them to use those powers to keep our country safe and to ensure, as I said, that our parliamentary and democratic processes and institutions are not undermined, whoever it may be that is attempting to do so.
Thank you. Sehr geehrter Herr Premierminister, dear Rishi Sunak, it's great to welcome you here in Berlin. Germany and the United Kingdom are close friends, partners and allies. We share a long history, a common approach to the world and important values like democracy, the rule of law and the free market economy. Welcome to Berlin. Meine Damen und Herren, lassen Sie mich etwas wiederholen, was mir sehr wichtig ist. Ohne Sicherheit ist alles nichts. Ich sage das natürlich mit Blick auf den unerbittlichen Angriffskrieg, den Russland seit mehr als 2 Jahren gegen die Ukraine führt. Ein Krieg, der unermessliches Leid erzeugt und unglaubliche Zerstörung. Deutschland und Großbritannien stehen gemeinsam an der Seite der Ukraine. Unser Ziel ist klar, zu unterstützen, dass sich die Ukraine gegen die russische Aggression behaupten kann. Wichtig ist aber auch, wir, die NATO-Staaten, sind nicht im Krieg mit Russland. Deutschland und Großbritannien sind die größten Unterstützer der Ukraine in Europa. Und wir werden, lieber Rishi, unsere Unterstützung fortsetzen, solange wie das notwendig ist. Es ist ein ermutigendes und auch notwendiges Signal, dass der amerikanische Kongress nun die Gelder zur Unterstützung der Ukraine freigegeben hat. Diese Entscheidung zeigt, dass Putin sich verrechnet, wenn er glaubt, die Staaten in Europa, in den USA, all die anderen Unterstützer würden die Ukraine irgendwann im Stich lassen. Wir werden das nicht tun. Ich will aber auch klar sagen, der Beschluss der Vereinigten Staaten entbindet uns hier in Europa nicht von der Aufgabe, unsere Unterstützung für die Ukraine weiter auszubauen, damit das Land sich gegen die Aggression verteidigen kann. Alle Europäer sollten im Verhältnis ihrer jeweiligen Wirtschaftskraft die notwendigen Entscheidungen treffen. Wir werden uns weiter eng abstimmen untereinander, insbesondere zu gemeinsamen Projekten, zum Training von ukrainischen Soldatinnen und Soldaten und um die verteidigungsindustrielle Basis der Ukraine zu stärken. Die ganz konkrete Kooperation bei Hubschraubern im Hinblick auf Wartung, Ausbildung und Bewaffnung gehört zum Beispiel dazu. Russlands Überfall auf die Ukraine markiert eine Zeitenwende. Das habe ich immer wieder so gesagt. Und damit ist natürlich verbunden, dass wir zur Kenntnis nehmen müssen, dass mit dem russischen Angriffskrieg auf die Ukraine die Sicherheitsarchitektur Europas gefährdet ist und die Verständigung in Europa und in der Welt, dass Grenzen mit Gewalt nicht verändert werden sollen. Für uns hier in Europa bedeutet das, dass wir den europäischen Pfeiler der NATO stärken müssen. Auch und ganz besonders, wenn es darum geht, über ein ausreichendes Abschreckungspotenzial zu verfügen. Denn unsere europäische Fähigkeit zur Abschreckung und Verteidigung muss immer glaubwürdig sein. Und wir müssen die vorhandenen Kapazitäten besser nutzen und die Zusammenarbeit zwischen unseren Ländern vertiefen. Ganz praktisch tun wir das mit Großbritannien bei einer ganzen Reihe von Projekten, bei einem neuen Artilleriesystem und beim Radpanzer Warsaw. Wir arbeiten zusammen beim Eurofighter und wir wollen auch dieses Flugzeug weiterentwickeln und wollen auch zusammenarbeiten bei der Sky Shield-Initiative. Ich sehe deshalb auch sehr positiv der Entwicklung entgegen, dass Großbritannien den deutsch-französisch-spanischen Exportkontrollabkommen beitritt und damit auch unsere Kooperation weiter vertieft werden kann. Unsere beiden Länder, Deutschland und Großbritannien, leisten wichtige Beiträge zu Europas verteidigungsindustrieller Basis. Und das wollen wir auch weiter stärken und weiter ausbauen. Wir werden deshalb auch eine Taskforce einsetzen, um die strukturierten und verbesserten Rahmen für bilaterale Sicherheits- und Verteidigungskooperation zu schaffen. Wir benötigen auch einen Austausch über viele Fragen der bilateralen Zusammenarbeit, die wir vertiefen werden. Da geht es zum Beispiel um Kooperation im Bereich der Energie, ganz besonders wenn es um erneuerbare Energien geht und Offshore-Wind in der Nordsee. Wir wollen auch eine Machbarkeitsstudie auf den Weg bringen, um den Handel mit Wasserstoff zwischen Deutschland und Großbritannien voranzubringen. Wir blicken auf eine sehr gute Kooperation unserer Sicherheitsbehörden, zum Beispiel gegen Schleuser und organisierte Kriminalität. Und deshalb werden wir auch den Dialog und die Zusammenarbeit in Migrationsfragen fortsetzen, unter Wahrung von Grundrechten und internationalem Recht. Für uns in Deutschland gehört dazu, dass wir auch legale Wege der Zuwanderung in unsere Gesellschaft mit im Blick haben, die wir brauchen, damit Wirtschaftswachstum und ökonomischer Wohlstand auch in Zukunft gewährleistet sind. Im Übrigen geht es uns darum, dass wir die Kontakte zwischen Deutschen und Briten stärken wollen. Das ist mir jedenfalls sehr wichtig, dass wir auch da unsere Zusammenarbeit ausbauen und das möglich machen, dass da keine Hürden dem engen Austausch der Briten und Deutschen entgegenstehen. Wir begrüßen viele Zusammenarbeiten, die wir im Bereich der Innovation haben und der Forschung. Auch das gehört zu der Partnerschaft unserer Länder. Man sieht, wir haben viele Themen, die wir miteinander laufend besprechen. Und ich bin deshalb umso mehr froh, dass wir das jetzt auch hier vor Ort in Berlin im direkten Kontakt tun. Ich will gerne ergänzen, das fällt umso leichter, als wir beide schon eine sehr lange Partnerschaft miteinander haben. Bevor wir unsere heutigen Ämter hatten, haben wir auch schon zusammengearbeitet. Und ich erinnere mich jedenfalls gerne daran. Und ich weiß, dass das für Rishi Sunak genauso gilt. In dem Sinne, schönen Dank fürs Kommen.
Well, Olaf, mein Freund, it's a real pleasure to be with you again. And as Olaf was saying, we go way back. And I remember when we were both finance ministers in the darkest days of the pandemic, I was on the phone a lot with you, and I hugely valued your advice as I designed our furlough scheme, which took in some part inspiration from your Kurzarbeit policy that you had instituted previously. And I also remember we bonded over the UK's most famous export to your adopted hometown of Hamburg, which was, of course, the Beatles. And when His Majesty the King was here last year on his first state visit as monarch, he spoke in the Bundestag of renewing the special bond of friendship between our countries. And our partnership is, I believe, a perfect symbol of that. And at this dangerous moment, the bond between our two nations is stronger than ever. We meet as a war rages on our continent and new threats are rising around the world. And Olaf, I want to congratulate you on your leadership in recognising the Zeitenwende and you taking the historic decision to increase Germany's defence spending. And we stand here today together as the leading defence spenders in Europe, unshakable NATO allies, and the two largest military supporters of Ukraine in Europe. And together we will continue to provide unwavering support for our Ukrainian friends, as you said, for as long as it takes. And we look forward to the Ukrainian Recovery Conference being hosted here in Berlin in June. And I know we'll continue to work closely together on other global challenges, including putting the Middle East on a better path. And together we have acted to meet this moment. We've taken greater responsibility for our collective security, and today we're going even further, opening a new chapter in the security relationship between our two nations, as you heard from Chancellor Scholz. We've committed to delivering a new framework for our cooperation on defence, and we're delivering an immediate expansion of our industrial cooperation, announcing a joint endeavour to procure the Boxer artillery system, providing our soldiers with a new cutting-edge capability and supporting hundreds of German and British jobs. Because, let's be clear, this is a partnership that connects with all aspects of our economy and our society. And you and I discussed our cooperation in many other areas today, from technology and AI to irregular migration to trade and investment. And I'm delighted to say that we've also secured around £8 billion of new investment in Britain, including into our energy sector. So I very much look forward to deepening our discussions in the coming months and weeks through the G7 and the NATO summits, the European political community, and maybe when our two football teams meet at Euro 2024. Because for all our shared values and our shared determination to meet the challenges of this new era, the thing that really unites us, as you said, is our people, Olaf. The love that Liverpool has for Jurgen Klopp, or that Munich has for Harry Kane. It's a reminder of the special bond of friendship that His Majesty has described. So as close allies, partners and friends,
convinced that Donald Trump is 100% committed to the central tenets